Welcome. Come on in. There's a handout right there. Are you here for how to make a computer? Excellent. You're in the right place.
How long is the session?
It'll be over by 2.
Okay, we may.
Okay. There's a handout right there.
She's good with one. Thanks.
Welcome to the Westport Library. I'm Bill Derry, the Assistant Director, and it's a little bit of irony and good luck that over a year ago, Jonathan Katz walked into, with his mother and his sister, one of our planning committee meetings for the Maker Faire last year. And he wowed everyone with his technical skills at that meeting. Then we met again at the Maker Faire where I met Jonathan's dad, and it was at the New York Maker Faire. Jonathan is definitely curious and interested in everything. I am going to use the online description of Jonathan as my introduction, but shortly after his Bar Mitzvah, when he got some money, he decided the first thing he would do was build his own computer. And he had $800 in cash and a dream, and he set out researching, budgeting, planning, shopping, and assembling a PC from parts that were collecting dust in the basement and from what he could resource online. So he became a real expert at finding the best price on good quality parts online. And after a bit of troubleshooting and a replacement part or two, we constructed an impressive machine, one that can do almost anything a typical off-the-shelf model can do, but for far less money, and it still has comparable speed, storage capacity, and graphics. He's 14. He's an avid student. He enjoys all of his classes in chemistry, ancient Greek, and naturally computer science. He also drops in on a biology class for fun whenever he can. Jonathan also takes part in competitive foil fencing, plays the violin with the performance group, and builds robots with his first tech challenge team. In his spare time, he endlessly tinkers with his computer and other random electronic projects and annoys his younger sister as much as possible. Today, he has a rehearsal at 2 o'clock for an afternoon performance. So we will definitely be wrapping up, and he will leave some time for questions. So hold on to your questions, or unless he has a different method in mind, and he'll be here for answering those questions. So let's give a round of applause to Jonathan for coming,
If you have a burning question, just raise your hand and I'll call on you. But otherwise, wait to the end. All right, so I am Jonathan Katz, that's the introduction stated. I'm going to teach you how to build a computer. And let's just jump right in. All right. How to succeed in computer building without really trying? Well, the answer is you can't. You have to, when you begin to build a computer, you need to set aside time, money, and you kind of have to set aside a certain amount of brain to think about the computer and to work on the computer. Now, there are a couple prerequisites which it would be good to have, but if you don't have them, don't stress. I'm going to go over them in the beginning. So I'm going to go over them in the beginning, so you won't have too much of a problem. All right. The prerequisites are intermediate to high tech knowledge of how parts work, basically. What a motherboard is, what graphics cards are. If you recognize these terms, don't worry, I'm going to explain them. And a medium tech skill, that means you can use a computer with a fair bit of ease. And you don't have to know any programming languages per se, you just have to know how to use a computer fairly well. All right. So, this is a basic, kind of simple, idolized computer. You have your motherboard, which is kind of the base, the foundation on which all the other parts work together. And the motherboard has low-level system things like controlling the fans, that kind of thing, that really your processor shouldn't be thinking about and your processor doesn't even need to know about. And I guess I kind of started talking about the processor. The processor is the brain of the computer. let's say you're using a calculator, you do 2 plus 2 on the calculator. Now it's a very simple thing for the processor to do, but the processor will be taking that calculation, calculating it, and then spitting it back out. And then that number will be displayed, including the calculator app, will be displayed by the graphics card. That is, if you have a graphics card, you don't need one. But a graphics card is much better than a processor at displaying graphics. And the graphics card will basically give your computer, give you what you see on the screen. It will render 3D graphics if you're playing a game. It will show with your desktop if you, yes?
Couldn't you also use, with the graphics cards, would it also increase gaming abilities and for 3D renderings on like TinkerCAD or any MakerBot softwares?
Graphics card is for everything you'll see on the screen, including 3D renderings and including games, if you want to play games. Now, data has to be stored somewhere for a short period of time. Let's say when you're just bringing up the calculator app, it's going to be read off the hard drive onto the memory, where it's going to be stored while it's going to be used by the computer. And the hard drive is basically your long-term storage. It's going to be slower. It's not going to work as quickly. It's not going to be able to take data off and put it back on as quickly. But it's going to be able to store huge chunks of data quite easily. And it's going to be able to store the data reliably. Now you have your memory, also known as RAM, random access memory, which is going to store temporarily whatever your computer happens to be displaying on the screen. And now that's going to be much smaller than your hard drive. It's going to require power, but it's going to be much faster. And that's going to power things like this presentation right now, where the presentation application will be loaded onto the memory. Now, you have a couple other things which may be less known. You have your power supply down there. That's just going to supply power to everything, and that's going to make sure everything gets exactly how much power it needs, and it's going to keep the amount of power it does get at safe levels. And then you have your disk drive over there. You may be more familiar with the disk drive than other components. That is for external media to put in, like if you have a CD or DVD, put that in there. And everything is connected with SATA cables, which are for data, and then you have, I can actually show you one here. This is a SATA connector. It's this little cable here. And then power, there are actually quite a few different power connectors, but you'll probably be able to figure out which goes where, especially if you read the manual. Now, there are a lot of parts you need to think about when you're building a computer. You need components like the processor and the GPU. You need a power supply, which I just mentioned. And you need cable, and you need to think about how you're going to work out cabling, which is how your case is going to write cables, how your power supply is going to have cables available or not. And then miscellaneous, which is a couple little things to keep in mind when you're building a computer. All right. So, acquiring parts. So many parts, so little money. You obviously aren't going to want to buy every single top-notch part out there unless you really want to build a good system. And that may not even be necessary. There are perfectly good mid-range parts to purchase. And so I find it's good to figure out what you want, then go online, figure out what the parts you would want cost, and then once you've figured out what they cost, then set a budget for yourself, and then go back and order the parts. So you need to balance your needs with your budget. If you intend to play graphics-heavy computer games, you'll probably want to spend more on the graphics card and less on the processor, because the processor will really only influence loading times for the game. So get a mid to high range graphics card and get a mid-range processor. Pick your shots about what you want to spend money on. So if you're going to get an SSD, which is a very fast way to store data. It's near in speed to RAM, but it's your hard drive. SSDs are a very good upgrade. However, SSDs have a higher price, a much higher price than hard drives, and they often store much less. So just keep that in mind when you're figuring out what you need. However, if all you really want is to boot up your computer in 8 seconds or something, you just need a SSD cache, and there are drives with a SSD cache, usually 8 to 16 gigabytes. That should be sufficient for a quick boot up, a quick loading up of programs you use often, and everything else is stored on a large hard drive. All right. So now that's great and everything, but you need to get the parts somewhere. So there are a couple of websites to keep in mind. Newegg.com is very good. They have good prices on their parts, and well, fairly good prices considering they give you good amount of tech support. They have very good reviews. They have good return policies. So Newegg.com is a good bet. Also, there you can purchase parts from Amazon. Amazon has a tech section, and your local computer store if you happen to live near one. And you won't be able to find parts at something like Best Buy or Radio Shack. You have to go to a dedicated computer store. Now, there are a couple other things that other places you can get parts. Maybe just check your attic or your basement or something. You'll probably find a fair amount of old computer parts there if you have previously owned computers. You can use those parts, but probably will work just fine. Don't go for hard drives. I made that mistake. Originally in my computer, I had a big 500 gigabyte hard drive from an old external hard drive line in the basement. Now, this hard drive, unfortunately, had a couple of problems with it. So after about a month or two of using it, it kind of broke. And it broke slowly and in a way that was hard to figure out what was going wrong, and then it started to really break, and then I realized I was in trouble. So if it's a part like a processor or a GPU or a hard drive, don't take it from an old computer. That also kind of sort of applies to a power supply. Power supplies can sometimes be perfectly good and sometimes be perfectly bad. So you take a little bit of risk, but a power supply is one part. If you're really looking to save money, you could grab from an old computer. But I'll talk a little bit about power supplies and the things you need to remember before you actually purchase power supply. All right, so components. Make sure you have a good return policy. Newegg has a good return policy. Do not force anything to fit. And it may seem like, okay, bought this part, it took 2 weeks to come, better fit, or I'm going to force it. Don't think that, because what's going to happen is, if it's not going to fit easily, there's either it was made cheaply and then you don't want to use the part, you want to send it back and get a better one, or it was just actually a part that doesn't fit your computer and it's no use to you. And if you force it, you may actually break it and void the warranty, so you can't return it. So don't force anything to fit. Don't sign up for extended warranty programs. They are pretty much the biggest waste of money when you're buying computer parts. You'll probably want to overclock or something, or maybe if you put the part in a computer that you're building, it will void the warranty anyway, so just stay away from those. And when in doubt, take a picture and upload it to Tom's Hardware. It's a good forum for tech questions in general, and they have actually a couple forum kind of areas devoted to people who are new to this. So, good to keep in mind. All right, power supplies. Not the greatest, not the most coolest part in your computer, but you do need to have one. It does need to be really reliable. Your power supply is the one where every computer needs, but you don't really want to buy. Now, to figure out how much wattage you need, because every single part in your computer case needs a certain amount of power, there's a great calculator you can write that down. It's in the notes if you need. And then you just increase it by about 50 watts to kind of factor in any components you may add in later. If you add in a second GPU or something, or if you add in a RAM, just keep that in mind. All right, you need to get a power supply with a high efficiency rating. That means it'll have a little box next to, like almost like a metal awarded kind of image next to the the picture of the power supply on the website, and that will tell you the efficiency rating. And they may not show it, but if they don't show it, it's probably pretty bad, so you don't want to go for that part. But if it's 75 or higher, that means it's good to buy, because if it's below 75, it's going to have heat problems. It's going to build up a lot of heat, because 75 means that 25% of the heat, the remaining 25%, because 75 is a percentage number, is going to be released in heat. And that may sound really, really bad, but considering how you're going to have to break up the power and everything, it's actually pretty good. So if it has below 75, be wary, don't buy it, because it's going to generate so much heat. It's going to be bad for your power supply, it's going to be bad for your computer, and it's probably not well made if it's not efficient. Okay, finally, check the reviews intelligently. If you see a lot of reviews that are kind of like Jen said, this part was great, you buy this part, like in bad kind of English, you probably know it's either generated by a spam bot or it was copied and pasted about 10 or 12 times with just some word subbed out. And you need to kind of make sure that whatever part you're buying, the reviews are good. Make sure they were written by actual humans. Newegg actually has a very good review system where it will actually tell you if they bought the part and if they have a tech ownership level, which means that they know how to use the parts that they bought. So they didn't just make a mistake. All right. If you see the manufacturer replying to the different reviews, you know that there's probably something wrong with the part, some defect, and so just stay away from that part. So, cabling. The problem with cabling is you need cables to connect everything in your computer, but they take up space and they block airflow in your computer case, which means heat is going to build up in your computer. So it's kind of which way do you lean? They have a couple different solutions to this. One is a very simple low-tech solution, zip ties. You just secure cables together, and that's going to keep them from kind of spreading apart and taking out more room. Also, you can use something called a modular power supply, where every single cable, if you actually look here, you can see these user cables coming out of the power supply, is detachable. So 99% of the time, you won't use every single cable the computer comes with. So what that means is, when you have a modular power supply, if you're not using the cable, you can just keep it somewhere else outside of your computer. Now, modular power supplies are usually a little more expensive because they have to figure out a way to get every single cable plugged in without having to, without building up extra heat, because that's going to require more space on the actual box of the cables to unplug and plug in cables. Now there are also sheath cables. I have actually sheath cables on mine, and that will wrap together cables that are most frequently used together. And that will also keep everything tight and compact. All right. Also, if you purchase a computer case that has good cable management, in fact this one does, you can see cables are kind of disappearing in there and coming out here. It allows you to kind of wrap cables around, out of the way, and it won't take up too much space. All right. Miscellaneous. This is kind of the stuff that's good to have, good to remember, but doesn't really have enough weight to it to get its own category. Now, there's something called RAID, and RAID is actually a way to store data if you have really important data that you don't want lost. So let's say you keep important financial documents on your computer. You can purchase 3 hard drives, all the same size, and use RAID to link them together. So if a single hard drive fails, the documents won't be lost. And if you can just add another disk to that group of disks, and it will be safe again. So that's good. There are actually software versions as well as hardware versions. Some motherboards come with it enabled by default. You can access it in the BIOS. which is what you see on your computer when you first start it up before you see Windows. And so there's a link right there which gives more information on how Windows works. Now there's something called SOI or Crossfire, and that's if you have multiple graphics cards and you want to harness the power of them to power one thing instead of having two monitors, each graphics card powering a different monitor. So your graphics card, which is actually this big thing sticking to this port here, will be connected by this little port here. And there's actually a connector you can buy to link two graphics cards. And it doesn't quite give you the same performance boost as you would get if you were to use one big graphics card, but it's a way to save money and add up the force of the graphics cards. Now, unfortunately, they have to be similar graphics cards on the same product line or something, and the performance, it doesn't double, it doesn't add together perfectly, but it's more moderate, like 60% or 40% higher efficiency with two identical graphics cards. Now, I have put together a little spec list for people in case they want something to kind of get started on. All these parts are kind of good parts to then add more stuff onto the system. You notice that I haven't actually put a dedicated GPU, but the processor itself has a GPU built in. Now, the case is a very good case. It's hard to break, so it's going to be a good first case. It's good cooling, good cable management, very thoughtfully designed. Then the power supply, you may notice it's 750 watts. That's probably more than you'll need for a while, but you can keep this power supply for a long, long time, and it will continue to power stuff, and you can just add more stuff into your build. Now, this is actually a hard drive. No, I'm sorry, not a hard drive, a motherboard. And this is a motherboard that is compatible with the processor. That's something to keep in mind when you're purchasing a motherboard. A motherboard has a processor socket on it, and the processor has to fit into that. And you will notice with the processor, if you were to go to the website, it would say AM3+, and that means it is an AM3+ socket, which is the same socket on the motherboard, so they're going to work together. And the processor is going to fit into the motherboard. Now, I have a Momentous XT hard drive, which is, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, a hard drive with a SSD cache. That's actually the hard drive in my computer. And that means that you're going to have a faster boot. So, now, operating systems. Now that you've built this wonderful computer, and it needs an operating system to run so you can actually do stuff on it. Now, there are a couple OSs to consider, and you may notice I included Windows 7, even though Windows 8 is the new thing, because Windows 8, it doesn't really make sense to purchase unless you have a touch menu on your computer, and you can buy touch menu displays, that's not a problem, but just keep that in mind. Now, you may not recognize these operating systems. These are actually called Linux distributions. And the Linux distribution is, there's a kernel called Linux, and macOS is based off that. And these are free distributions these are free operating systems made on the Linux kernel. A kernel is basically what you then build the graphical user interface on, what you see on your screen. So it's going to regulate things like fan speed, processor usage, all the really basic things, and then they can build stuff on top of that. Okay, how to install. If you have a disk drive in your computer, I actually don't. I kind of use the space to reach into my computer to fix some cables, something like that. You can put the disk into your computer with your computer off, and then when you boot up the computer, you should see a couple seconds before your computer then goes into the operating system boot up. Strike F12 for one-time boot, or strike F2 for BIOS settings. And the BIOS is the really low level, kind of like a simple operating system to make sure everything runs smoothly on your computer. So you'll just hit the key that it says, and then click whatever kind of media you put into your computer. Now for a USB drive, you click the USB drive. If you put it in via your disk drive, then you just get that and off it would go, and you get walked through the installation process. Now, this one is a little more advanced. You have to insert a flash drive into your computer, and then follow the instructions. It's kind of complicated. I think that if you were to spend a little bit of time on it, you could get it. But just be aware that that's a little more demanding and intensive. All right. Troubleshooting. Now that you have the operating system on your computer, now that you're going to put an operating system on your computer, you need to make sure that your computer works. And when you hit the power button for the first time, it may do nothing. My computer did nothing. So I checked the manual, I went back, and I found that I actually had this cable right here unplugged. I had not plugged that in. So just read the manual, make sure that you follow the instructions exactly. The motherboard will come with the manual, the processor will come with the manual, the case will come with the manual, and the power supply will come with the manual. So just check all the manuals, make sure they match up, and figure out what you need to do. There are also some forums, such as Tom's Hardware and Stack Overflow, which are very computer-oriented, and they're very good at addressing some high difficulty questions you have, like about the flash drive, if you want to put an operating system on a flash drive. Now, there's something called Reddit. You may have heard of it, you may have not. And it actually has a PC forum, and you make your own if you know what Reddit is. But the PC forum is very, very good. So just check that out in case you have a question about your computer in general. Now, if you are sure that you were doing everything correctly, and you suspect that something may be broken, maybe it emitted some smoke when you first switched your computer on or something not good like that, you can send it back to the manufacturer and tell them it's defective, tell them what happened, take pictures of the part, and send the part and the pictures and whatever evidence you have back to the manufacturer. And then post a comment on the web or whatever, and tell them that your part didn't work. And then they'll get in touch with you and try to help you, hopefully, especially if you bought a part from New York. I am not endorsed by New York, by the way. All right, so I just have some links up there, articles on the computers that you may want to look at. And just to let everybody know, everybody makes mistakes sometimes. So if you make a mistake, don't worry.
Jonathan, are you having trouble with connectors?
I had a little bit of trouble when I first started.
I work with a number of computers, and we're having terrible experiences with the connections and the connectors. The material in the connectors is not good, and you constantly have to clean them off and reboot them and keep going back because of the material apparently in the connectors. I was just wondering if you were having that experience.
No, you can actually purchase if the cables are not good. You can go online, figure out which cable you need. In fact, you can take a picture of it, tell the manufacturer you're having a problem, ask for a refund, and then go buy another cable from another website.
These computers are in a lot of trucks, so the environment is very harsh. And diesel trucks vibrate a lot, and that has something to do with it, but the materials actually in the connectors gets defective very quickly, and that's our experience. We thank you for your presentation. You do a good job with it.
Thank you. Behind?
Yeah, did you have to do any soldering, or was this all like pre-assembled components that you had?
All these components were pre-assembled. I mean, some people want to make things like this. This is actually an adapter, which is for older computers, older like hard drives or disk drives or something, onto newer, so we can plug it in there. This disk drive right here, and we're going to pass these around. It actually has this older connector, and then on the other end you have a small connector. I'm going to hold it up on the display. That is a newer connector, and this translates from the old to the new. And some people like to solder themselves. I didn't feel comfortable. It is,
I want to hug the floor. Just have one more question.
okay, you can say.
What are you going to do next?
Keep using this computer, upgrade it if I need to.
You going to build anything else though?
Maybe not related to a computer at all, but
Okay.
I know like the basics of overclocking, like on Android phones, but do you know how to do it on a computer? I don't know.
All right. Overclocking varies per computer system. So for graphics cards, all you need to really do is download a program called MSI Afterburner, and you can change the clock speed. Be very careful because you don't want to burn something out. And Gizmodo, I believe, has a very good guide on how to overclock and do it slowly by slowly. One thing you'll see if you bring up the MSI overclock window is the voltage. Don't touch that. With any ordinary overclock you would be doing with an ordinary cooler, not like a massive water cooler or anything, you don't need to touch the voltage. The voltage will be just fine where it is. Yes.
You know, I actually take apart of it. I've taken apart 5 computers before. Two of which had some pretty good parts. The others were like small, tiny treasure chests full of awesome parts. I mean, I think taking apart the computer is a pretty cheap way to do it. Except sometimes you might have to examine parts carefully to make sure that's why the computer wasn't given to me because it was defective. The computer was given to me was defective. So I must check all the parts to figure out which part was defective and throw that one in a trash can behind it.
Okay. Don't really throw out the parts.
Well, if it's defective.
Well, if it's defective, send it back to the manufacturer. Or even put it on eBay because there may be something salvageable about that, and there may be somebody who wants the parts for some reason. So, yeah.
Is that possible to tell us the parts that are in your actual computer that you built, not just like your one that was built with the
Explain the parts inside the actual computer one by one, so you can see, in addition to the graphic, the actual.
All right. I am now passing around 2 hard drives. They are, you'll probably notice the difference. One is a very lightweight SSD with a new data connector on it, and the old one is this big one, this IDE connector. And it's just to kind of get a sense of what the new connector is, what you should be buying and what you shouldn't be buying. Because if it's an old, big connector, stay away from it because that's not what you need. All right, so this is the graphics card. This is, you can see, you plug it in here for power, that goes to the power supply, and then you plug it into something called a PCIe slot. And that will transfer the data between that and the motherboard and the processor. Out here you have the video out to, and I can actually switch back to the side with the stuff on it. Alright, and this is going out to the computer display. And then you have your power supply, that's this big box right here. See it right there. And that will, you can see power goes in here and comes out the other side in the form of this big bundle of cables. Then you have your processor, which is actually covered up by a heatsink. Don't take the heatsink off when you're running the computer. It'll get so hot it'll melt the processor almost instantaneously. And so as you can see, you have a fan, and then you have behind the fan is the heatsink. Now, the hard drives actually go here. You can see this is the hard drive. It's very small. It can fit a bigger 3.5-inch hard drive, but all I really need for this is a 2.5-inch hard drive, because that's the size they sold it. So, do you have any other questions? and then it adjusts, oh, and here's the RAM. This is where the data is going to be stored temporarily.
John, the data theft is a big issue these days. What do you recommend regarding the disposal of hard drives? That's a tremendous issue. People are scavenging these hard drives at dumps and transfer stations. I've seen it, and it's an issue with a lot of people. I just wonder if you had a recommendation on hard drives.
Yeah, with hard drives, you can either go the low tech way and break it, but I don't recommend it. What I recommend to do is you actually plug it into a new computer, a computer that works through one of these SATA connectors, and then plug it in via the power supply. And then you can go into a program called CCleaner and find the drive you're looking for. Don't erase the drive that you store everything else on. Find the drive that you just plug in, and you can go and wipe it very thoroughly, and then throw out the drive.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Yeah.
I noticed in your dream list that you listed an AMD processor. Okay, when I've been doing research on processors, is AMD versus Intel. It's almost like a religious war. And I've been looking, AMD processors and motherboards are usually a lot cheaper. But when I look at the reviews and comparisons on, say, Tom's Hardware or Non-Tech, AMD Tech, it seems like the software tests that they benchmarks that they put the CPUs through, the AMD CPUs always seem to come out second best to the Intel chips, at similar price points or similar capabilities. So, why AMD versus Intel?
Well, the thing about AMD processors is, yeah, they do tend to run a little slower for the same clock speed. However, AMD processors are kind of going a different way than Intel right now. Intel processors have the Sandy Bridge processors, which are actually meant to be power saving, and they're meant to, and they're not meant to be overclocked much, and they actually build up more heat than the previous generation of processors that are by Intel. So AMD processors actually are more oriented to big, heavy desktops, like when you'd be building, and are less oriented to laptops. But a good AMD processor, which is the one I have here, you can see actually is 4.0 gigahertz. That's twice what's actually in my new laptop. That will be plenty, and I think it actually has 6 cores. So that would be on par, if not better, than most processors available today, and has the good thing, and it has a nice little GPU built in, which is going to run most games at moderate level, just to kind of have a GPU in case that on the occasion that you need to use it. All right.
Your computer connects to a big hulking giant. Actually, to fix that, you could buy something called a Raspberry Pi computer. It's only like $40, pretty cheap, and it has processing. It probably might have either one, a little bit more, a bit less more processing power than that big cabinet over there.
Well, actually, the Raspberry Pi, it has a 500 megahertz processor, and it has a mobile processor, which means it's more it's closer to what you'd see on a phone. And that's not powerful enough for what I need in my computer. Also, I can add things like a big graphics card. So while the Raspberry Pi is good for little projects like a Pandora radio, where it can sit on your desk, and it has enough power to decode the compressed files from Pandora and play it, doesn't really have enough power to be a full-on computer that you use all the time. All right?
I know it's basically like not profitable, but have you ever tried Bitcoin mining? Like building a computer for Bitcoin mining?
No, I have not. I kind of don't really feel comfortable dealing with Bitcoin because it's pretty volatile. I mean, that's kind of a cool idea. That's something you can do with a Raspberry Pi. But I don't think I want to do that. Any other questions?
If there aren't any other questions, there's one more question.
Okay.
Okay, CPUs that have graphics processor unit built in. How much money would you have to spend on a graphics card ballpark to get something better than what the GPU that's built into the CPU, the graphics unit that's on the CPU would perform? And does it use, if you have a GPU on the CPU, does that take up part of the external RAM?
The GPU on the CPU does take up some external RAM. However, most GPUs that are in kind of the ballpark range of the GPU built in don't actually take up a lot of RAM comparatively. So I have 8 gigabytes, so it would probably take up 1/8 of that. And it does also have a small cache built in, which is going to reduce that number. So it would probably take up even less, like maybe 1/16 or something. So I would say that the GPU would probably be in the ballpark of the cheaper version, the lower quality version of this graphics card, the GTX 460. And that would be available probably today. If you were to buy it today, it would probably be around $100 to $75. And that's good enough to do pretty much everything you would do in an ordinary desktop experience, like a home desktop experience, along with some extra graphics capabilities, should you want to do anything occasionally. All right, I'm actually going to turn my computer on. No, yeah. This will show you.
Do you mind set on being a server, or are you just going to stop here?
I may make a server. The thing about a server is you have to kind of forgot to switch my power. The thing about a server is you kind of have to dedicate time to it. It's going to have to always be on. And servers are not the most interesting things to run. So, and I don't really have any purpose for a server. So I don't see why would. And this can function as a server if I needed to, temporarily. All right. One thing just kind of I would like to quickly mention is you may see something called a workstation graphics card. And that is if you're doing a lot of, as you said, MakerBot like sketches or something like that, where you're not going to be playing games, but you're going to be doing fairly specific 3D graphic tasks. My computer is probably booted up by now. So that was just to show you it does work. I'm just going to switch it off. All right. And a workstation GPU is, from a hardware perspective, very similar to something like this graphics card. In fact, sometimes the hardware is actually exactly the same. What the workstation GPU has is it's slightly optimized, it's fine-tuned for workstation tasks. So this graphics card won't actually do so well when you're doing some really advanced 3D modeling. However, a graphics card with the same hardware, but a graphics card made for workstation purposes would do much better. So unless you're working with 3D modeling a lot, you can just get an ordinary graphics card. All right. Any other questions?
Thanks, Jonathan.
Jonathan. Let's hear it for Jonathan.
Really